Hey guys, there is a simple truth, but most of us spend nearly an entire lifetime before we truly understand it. You do not control life. You do not control the world, and the more you try to control it, the more exhausted you become. Think back over the years you have lived. How much time have you spent worrying about things that were never truly within your power? You worried about what other people thought of you. You worried about what the future might bring. You worried about events that had not even happened yet. You worried about things that had already happened, but could never be changed, and while you were worrying, life kept moving forward. Time did not pause so you could figure things out. It simply continued moving ahead. More than 2,000 years ago, a philosopher who was once born into slavery said something that could change the way you see your entire life. Epictetus taught that some things are within our control and some things are not. It sounds like a simple statement, but if you truly understand it, everything begins to change. Because most human suffering comes from a single mistake. We try to control things that were never ours to control. We want other people to understand us. We want life to be fair. We want events to unfold exactly as we planned. But life does not work that way. Life does not ask what you want. It simply unfolds. People come and go. Plans change. Markets rise and fall. Bodies grow older, and the things you once believed were certain suddenly disappear. If you cling tightly to everything, every small change will feel like a shock. But the Stoic philosophers looked at the world differently. They did not try to control the world. They learned to control themselves. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in his private journal, "If you are distressed by something external, the pain is not caused by the thing itself, but by your judgment about it. And you have the power to change that judgment." That is the real power of a human being. Not the power to control the world, but the power to control how we respond to it. Imagine two people experiencing the same event. Both of them lose their jobs. The first person collapses emotionally. He believes life has betrayed him. He becomes overwhelmed with worry, anger, and bitterness. The second person also feels pain, but he looks at the situation differently. He says to himself, "This was not within my control, but how I respond to it is." Two people, the same event, yet two completely different lives. What created the difference? Not circumstances, but perception. This is why Stoic philosophy has endured for more than 2,000 years. Not because it promises an easy life, but because it teaches us how to remain steady in a life that cannot be controlled. Look at the world today. Every day the news seems full of chaos. Economies shift. Politics divide people. Social media pushes everyone to compare themselves with others, and many people feel as if life itself is slipping beyond their control. But there is one truth that very few people realize. You do not need to control everything in order to live peacefully. You only need to control yourself. Peace does not come from making the world perfect. Peace comes from no longer depending on the world to feel okay. The Stoics called this inner freedom, a state where what happens outside of you no longer dictates what happens inside of you. That does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean losing your emotions. It simply means you are no longer carried away by life like a leaf in the wind. You still feel, you still experience, but you do not lose yourself. Many people only begin to understand this after living through many years. When you are young, you believe that if you work hard enough, you can control everything. You believe your plans will unfold exactly as expected, but life has its own way of teaching humility. It changes your plans. It introduces the unexpected. It forces you to adapt, and over time, you begin to realize something important. Peace does not come from everything going your way. Peace comes from accepting that many things will not go your way. That is real maturity. Not becoming stronger than the world, but becoming calm in the face of it. Once you understand this, a heavy burden begins to fall from your shoulders. You no longer try to control what others think. You no longer fight every change that appears. You no longer waste energy worrying about things beyond your reach. Instead, you focus on one thing: yourself, your thoughts, your actions, your reactions. And when you learn to master those things, you have already mastered the most important part of life. But here is the interesting part. Most people do not even realize they are trying to control the world until the world begins to resist them. Most people believe they are simply reacting to life, but if you watch closely, something else is happening. They are constantly trying to control it. Control the future, control other people, control how they are perceived, control outcomes that have never belonged to them in the first place. And when those attempts fail, as they inevitably do, something inside them tightens. Frustration appears, then anxiety, then anger. What they rarely realize is this: the suffering they feel does not come from the event itself. It comes from the expectation that the event should have been different. This is the trap of control, and it is one of the oldest traps in human history. 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosopher Epictetus watched people fall into this same pattern again and again. Men with wealth, still restless. Men with influence, still fearful. Men with comfort, still dissatisfied. And he came to a very clear conclusion. Human beings are not disturbed by things. They are disturbed by their judgments about things. This insight may sound simple at first, but if you sit with it long enough, you begin to see how deeply it explains human misery. Imagine a rainy day. For one person, the rain is an inconvenience. It ruins their plans. It makes them irritated. They complain about the weather, as if the sky itself should have consulted them first. But for another person, the same rain is peaceful. It cools the air. It nourishes the earth. It becomes an opportunity to slow down. Same rain, two completely different experiences. The difference is not the event. The difference is the interpretation. This is the quiet power of the Stoic mindset. It reminds us that we are not passive victims of circumstance. We are participants in how those circumstances affect us. And once you begin to understand this, you start noticing something surprising about your own life. Many of the situations that once caused you stress no longer feel as heavy, not because they disappeared, but because you stopped fighting them. There is a strange relief in accepting reality, not surrendering to it helplessly, but recognizing it clearly. A storm arrives. You do not scream at the clouds. You close the windows. You adapt. In the same way, Stoicism teaches that the wise person does not demand that life obey their preferences. They learn how to respond skillfully to whatever life presents. This shift from resistance to response is the moment real freedom begins, because resistance keeps the mind trapped. Response keeps the mind active and clear. But there is another reason why so many people struggle with letting go of control. It feels like weakness. The ego whispers something dangerous. If you stop trying to control everything, you will lose. So people double down. They argue harder. They worry more. They replay conversations in their minds. They imagine better outcomes that can never be returned to, and little by little, their mental energy drains away. Yet the Stoics observed a paradox. The more a person tries to control everything, the less peace they actually have, while the person who accepts uncertainty often becomes calmer, clearer, and stronger. Why? Because they are no longer fighting a war they cannot win. The world is simply too large to control, too complex, too unpredictable. Empires rise and fall. Markets expand and collapse. People change their minds. Even the strongest body eventually ages. If you base your happiness on controlling these forces, your peace will always remain fragile. But if you base your peace on something internal, your character, your perspective, your responses, then you become much harder to shake. This is why the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote constantly about mastering the inner world. Despite ruling one of the most powerful empires in history, he reminded himself daily that external events were not truly his domain. He could influence them, he could guide them, but he could never fully control them. What he could control was his mind, and that was enough. Think about that for a moment. An emperor with armies, wealth, and power still recognized the limits of control. How many people today believe they should be able to control everything in their personal lives? The opinions of strangers, the reactions of family members, the unpredictable direction of the future. This expectation creates enormous pressure. Pressure that the human mind was never designed to carry. But when you release that expectation, something remarkable happens. Your attention shifts. Instead of worrying about everything that might happen, you focus on what you can actually do. Instead of obsessing over other people's opinions, you focus on your own integrity. Instead of trying to eliminate uncertainty, you learn how to walk through it with steadiness. This is not passive living. It is disciplined living. The Stoics were not weak. They were incredibly resilient because they trained their minds to operate under a different principle. Do what is within your power. Accept what is not, and never confuse the two. At first, this practice feels uncomfortable. The mind has spent years believing it should control everything. Letting go feels unfamiliar. But over time, something begins to change. Your reactions slow down. Your thinking becomes clearer. The emotional storms that once consumed your days begin to lose their intensity. You start to see events more objectively. A criticism no longer feels like a personal attack. A delay no longer feels like a disaster. A setback no longer feels like the end of the road. You begin to respond instead of react, and that single shift response instead of reaction transforms the quality of your life. It is the difference between being dragged by events and walking beside them with awareness. This is the heart of Stoic strength. Not domination, not emotional suppression, but composure. The calm ability to remain grounded even when the world around you becomes chaotic, and this ability becomes even more valuable as life unfolds. Because as the years pass, one truth becomes increasingly obvious. The world will never stop changing. People you trust will surprise you. Plans will fail. Unexpected opportunities will appear. Health will fluctuate. Circumstances will evolve in ways you could never have predicted. Trying to control all of it is exhausting, but learning to navigate it with clarity, that is empowering. But here is where the Stoic teaching becomes even more powerful. Because once you stop trying to control the world, you discover the one place where your influence is absolute: your own mind. There is a moment in life, often later than we would like, when a person begins to notice something about their own thoughts. They are rarely still. The mind runs constantly. It jumps from memory to memory, from worry to worry, from one imagined future to another. A conversation from 10 years ago suddenly returns. A mistake from the past replays again, and then, without warning, the mind leaps forward. What if this happens? What if something goes wrong? What if things do not turn out the way I hope? Most people assume this mental activity is normal, and to some degree, it is. But what they do not realize is how much suffering is created not by life itself, but by the mind's endless attempt to predict, control, and rehearse the future. This is what we now call overthinking. But the Stoics understood this phenomenon long before modern psychology gave it a name. The Roman philosopher Seneca once observed something profound about human anxiety. He said that people suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think about how often that happens. You imagine a difficult conversation long before it takes place. You rehearse every possible outcome. You worry about what someone might say. You build entire emotional storms in your mind. And then the moment arrives, and it turns out to be far less dramatic than you expected. Or perhaps it never happens at all. The event existed only in the theater of the mind, yet the emotional cost was real. This is one of the hidden ways we surrender control of our lives. We allow the mind to wander into places where our influence does not exist, into futures we cannot predict, into past events that cannot be changed, and in doing so, we give our peace away. But Stoicism offers a different approach. Instead of chasing every thought that appears, the Stoic learns to observe them, to recognize that not every thought deserves attention. Not every worry deserves energy. The mind produces ideas the way the sky produces clouds. Some are meaningful. Many simply drift by. The wise person learns the difference. They do not chase every cloud across the sky. They simply watch it pass. This ability to observe one's thoughts without becoming trapped inside them is one of the most powerful skills a human being can develop. Because once you learn it, something remarkable happens. Your mind becomes quieter, not silent, but calmer. The constant internal arguments begin to fade. The urgent need to solve every possible future problem disappears. You begin to live more fully in the present moment. This does not mean you ignore the future. The Stoics believed strongly in preparation, but they understood a critical distinction. Preparation happens in the present. Worry happens in the imagination. One is productive. The other is exhausting. When you learn to separate the two, your mental energy becomes far more focused. Instead of wasting hours replaying fears, you take meaningful action. Instead of worrying about outcomes you cannot control, you concentrate on the effort you can control. This shift, small as it may seem, changes the entire experience of living. Imagine waking up in the morning without the weight of yesterday's regrets pressing on your shoulders. Imagine approaching the day without the constant background noise of imagined disasters. Imagine meeting challenges with calm curiosity instead of panic. This is the freedom Stoicism offers. Not the elimination of problems, but the elimination of unnecessary suffering. Life will always include difficulty. No philosophy can remove that, but Stoicism teaches that much of what we call suffering is actually resistance. Resistance to events we cannot change. Resistance to the natural unpredictability of existence. Resistance to reality itself. And once you stop resisting reality, something surprising happens. You begin to work with it instead of against it. This is where resilience is born, not from controlling the world, but from adapting to it skillfully. Imagine a tree standing in a powerful wind. If the tree were completely rigid, it would break. But because it bends slightly with the wind, it survives. Human beings are much the same. Those who insist that life must follow their exact expectations often become the most fragile. But those who remain flexible, those who understand that life will change, shift, and surprise them, become much stronger. This is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the wisdom of accepting the limits of control while still acting with strength and integrity. And perhaps nowhere is this wisdom more valuable than in the later stages of life. Because by the time a person has lived for many decades, they have already witnessed how unpredictable life can be. They have seen plans fail. They have seen unexpected opportunities appear. They have seen people change in ways they never anticipated. At that stage, clinging to the illusion of control becomes exhausting, but letting go of that illusion can feel like a deep exhale, a release. Suddenly, the mind no longer needs to manage the entire universe. It only needs to manage one small corner of it, the inner world, your thoughts, your reactions, your character. This is the one domain where your authority remains absolute. No one can force you to think a certain way. No one can command your inner perspective, even in the most difficult circumstances. The human mind retains the ability to choose its response. History is full of people who proved this truth under extreme conditions. Philosophers, prisoners, leaders, ordinary individuals facing extraordinary hardship. They discovered that while their external freedom could be limited, their inner freedom remained intact. And once a person realizes this, something profound happens. They stop feeling like a victim of life. They begin to feel like a participant in it. Events still occur. Challenges still arise, but the person no longer feels powerless. They know they possess the ability to respond with clarity and dignity, and that knowledge alone brings enormous strength. Because if you control your response, you control the most important part of any situation. But there is still one question left. If peace does not come from controlling the world, and it does not come from predicting the future, then where does lasting peace actually come from? For most of our lives, we are taught an idea that seems reasonable. If we can just arrange the world correctly, then we will finally feel peace. If work goes well, if the family is stable, if the economy cooperates, if people treat us fairly, then finally we will relax. But life rarely unfolds in such a tidy way. Just as one problem resolves, another appears. Just as one worry fades, a new uncertainty emerges. And so people spend years, sometimes decades, chasing a version of peace that always seems to be waiting somewhere in the future. The Stoics saw this pattern clearly. They realized that if peace depends on controlling the world, then peace will always remain fragile because the world is not ours to command. It never has been. Storms will come. People will misunderstand us. Plans will collapse. Unexpected events will reshape the path ahead. And yet, despite all this uncertainty, there have always been individuals who remain remarkably calm. People who move through difficulty with quiet steadiness. People who seem anchored even when life around them becomes chaotic. What makes them different? The Stoics believed the answer was surprisingly simple. They stopped demanding that reality obey their preferences. Instead, they learned to work with reality as it is. This is not resignation, it is alignment. When you stop arguing with what already exists, a tremendous amount of energy becomes available. Energy that was once spent resisting the inevitable. Energy that can now be used to live more fully. This idea may sound subtle, but it changes everything. Imagine standing in the ocean while a wave approaches. You have two options. You can fight the wave, trying desperately to push it back, or you can adjust your stance, allowing the wave to pass while you remain balanced. The wave will arrive either way, but your experience of it will be completely different. Life works in much the same way. Events will come. Some pleasant, some painful, some entirely unexpected. Trying to prevent every wave from arriving is impossible, but learning how to stand steadily as the waves pass, that is within your power. This is the essence of Stoic strength, not rigid control, but steady balance, and when a person learns this balance, something profound begins to change inside them. Their mind becomes quieter, their reactions slower and more thoughtful. The small frustrations that once dominated their day begin to lose importance. They no longer feel the need to respond to every irritation. They no longer feel the need to win every argument. They no longer feel the need to prove themselves to everyone around them. Instead, they become selective. Selective about what deserves their attention. Selective about where their energy goes. Selective about which battles are worth fighting. And strangely, this selectiveness often makes them more effective in the moments that truly matter, because their energy is no longer scattered, it is focused. This is why the Stoics believed that inner discipline creates outer strength. A calm mind sees more clearly. A clear mind chooses more wisely. And wise choices create a steadier life. As the years pass, this understanding becomes even more meaningful. Because time has a way of simplifying things. What once felt urgent begins to feel trivial. What once felt overwhelming begins to feel manageable. And a quiet realization begins to grow. Most of the things we once worried about never truly mattered. Not the opinions of strangers. Not the temporary setbacks. Not the imagined disasters that never occurred. What mattered were the moments we were fully present. The conversations we truly listened to. The kindness we offered when it was needed. The courage we showed when circumstances were uncertain. These are the moments that remain when the years pass. And this realization brings with it a deep sense of calm. Because it means the path to a meaningful life was never as complicated as we imagined. It was simply a matter of attention to the present moment, attention to the quality of our actions, attention to the small choices that shape our character day by day. The Stoics often reminded themselves of another powerful truth. Life is not measured only by its length. It is measured by how consciously it is lived. A short life lived with clarity and dignity can hold more meaning than a long life spent in distraction. This is why they focused so deeply on the present, not because the past and future are unimportant, but because the present is the only place where life actually occurs. Right now, in this moment, not yesterday, not tomorrow. Here, and within this moment, lies the only real power any human being possesses. The power to choose how to think, to choose how to respond, to choose how to treat others, to choose whether we spend our attention on what matters or waste it on what does not. These choices may seem small, but repeated day after day, they quietly shape the entire direction of a life. Over time, they shape something even deeper: character. The Stoics believed character was the only possession that could never truly be taken away. Money can disappear, status can vanish, health can decline, but the quality of your character remains the result of your own decisions. And this realization brings a powerful kind of freedom, because once you understand it, you stop trying to control the entire world. You focus instead on becoming the kind of person who can meet whatever the world brings, calmly, steadily, with integrity. This does not remove difficulty from life, but it transforms how difficulty is experienced. Instead of feeling like chaos, it becomes a test of character. Instead of feeling like injustice, it becomes an opportunity to respond with wisdom. This shift from resistance to resilience is one of the most profound transformations a human being can experience, and it often begins with a simple recognition. You were never meant to control the entire world. You were only meant to govern yourself within it. Once you accept that, a surprising peace begins to emerge. Not the fragile peace that depends on perfect circumstances, but a deeper peace. The kind that remains steady even when circumstances change. The kind that grows stronger with time rather than weaker. The kind that allows a person to walk through life with quiet confidence, because they know that whatever happens, they will meet it with clarity, with patience, with courage. And in the end, that may be the greatest freedom Stoicism offers. Not the power to control life, but the strength to live it well. So perhaps today, you might pause for a moment. Take a breath. Look at the world around you without rushing to change it, and remember something simple, yet powerful. You do not control the entire world, but you do control how you meet it. Your thoughts, your choices, your response. And sometimes, that is more than enough. If reflections like this bring you a sense of clarity or calm, you may wish to continue exploring the timeless wisdom of Stoic philosophy. Here we reflect on the teachings of thinkers like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius. Lessons that have helped people navigate uncertainty for thousands of years. If this message resonated with you, consider subscribing so we can continue this journey together. Until next time, may you have good health, good fortune, peace in your mind, and the quiet strength that comes from mastering the only thing you were ever meant to control: yourself. See you next video.